I know that you and I have talked about it off the air, but for the sake of the audience, I had this gentleman on, this hunter, back probably 10, 15 episodes now, and he had talked about this Sasquatch had picked up a rock and started banging it against a tree. And as the Sasquatch would do this, it would stop and it would listen, put its ear up against the tree and listen, and then step back and take the rock and smash the tree a few more times. And then finally it pushed the tree down. And it had grabbed a possum out of the deadfall tree, smashed it against another tree, killing the possum. The Sasquatch then ripped open the possum and basically sat down and ate it. Did you ever observe that type of behavior when you were out mining?
Well, we've talked about this before, as a matter of fact, Wes, but yes, they will bang or slap the trees like that. It's typical behavior that I have observed, where they are feeding and they're looking for something to scurry inside the tree. And they'll knock it over, and they'll sometimes even use the rock to kill whatever they get. Or they'll be looking for larvae. And like I said before, pine bark beetles and wood grubs and even wood ants, they make a lot of noise when you go and hit the tree like that and put your ear up to it. Sometimes you don't even have to. You just listen. You can hear them moving. And you can knock it over, and it usually falls apart. The tree itself will fall apart. They can get those, wood ant larvae out, and they eat them, and they eat the wood grubs, and they eat the larvae from the pine bark beetles. And I guess they're, omnivores. Is that what you would call them? Where, like a bear. And, like bears eat moth. You can go up and see where, they've turned boulders over and eat those moths. Well, lo and behold, speaking of what they do, old Sasquatch, he'll do the same thing. But also, yes, they do wood knocks. They do wood knocks as communication to say, I'm over here, this is where I'm at. Where are you at? It's not all just for communication, also for supper.
Yeah, they're feeding just like any other wild animal.
Right.
Bob, last night we were talking about the Sasquatch that you ran into when you were mining, somewhat of a rapport, and I was very fascinated by the encounter. I wanted to ask you, when you were out mining, was that the only creature that you ran into, or did you actually see other ones as well?
I saw a lot of them. One of my other, this was just a unique encounter that was basically unique, I guess you might say. As far as other encounters, I've had close encounters. I had one come out. I've told a little bit of this before. I've had one come out while I was working a pocket in a creek, and it was across the creek from me. The creek was pretty good size. I just happened to look up, and there he was, and he was watching me, pan gold, and looking for gold, and I looked back behind me, and my rifle's way back behind me. It scared me pretty good. But he stood there. I started saying the Lord's Prayer outside. Out loud as I could go. I sang Puff the Magic Dragon, and I sang nursery rhymes, and I sang the Lord's Prayer. I just wanted to keep it. I don't know. It just felt like I needed to do that. I wanted to keep it interested and not coming across and tearing my head off. well, it would sway back and forth a little bit and everything, and I would look at it and it would straighten back up. And I was trying not to, look at it direct on. I would kind of look up, through my, over my forehead, kind of, to see it. And I just kept panning the same damn rocks and everything over and over and over and over again. I happened to look up. I looked at the shadows on the ground, and I thought, Lord, man, this has been almost an hour. I happened to look up at one point, and it wasn't even there anymore.
Yeah, you hear about people who have encounters. I've had people on the show before that said they sang songs or recited the Lord's Prayer, or and I remember I asked one guy, I said, why do you think you sang a song? I don't remember the song he sang, but he said, I think it was more for me than it was for anything else, just to kind of, it was good for the soul, it was good for the psychology of the situation, just to kind of, so I wouldn't freak out, is basically why he did it.
Yeah, it probably is the same reason. I wanted to hear something, I wanted to hear my voice. I wanted a noise to be made. I don't know why I wanted a noise to be made. That I think was my motivation more than anything, outside of the fact that I was drained.
Yeah, and I don't blame you on that. Bob, when you were out living in the way you were, middle of nowhere, what type of vocals did you hear from these creatures?
Oh, much like what I hear now. The screams, what you would, I guess, kind of like babbling, kind of,
Oh, like the gibber, the chatter.
Yeah, like they're talking real fast or something, like they're discussing something or whatever, or long distance communication, and a lot of grunt and things of that sort. I really didn't get a lot of vocalization out of them, as I did the grunting sound. Where we used to live, we had a canyon. There was a big cut in the ground, and we used to go up. There was a family group that lived in that canyon that we discovered, and we would go and sit on the rocks above that canyon. I guess it was probably at that point, that part right there was probably about 300 maybe feet deep or something like that. You could hear, their screams, and they're kind of like a wail and stuff like that. It's pretty much what we've given you before. That's pretty much all the same, except for sometimes it's really, really intense.
I've had guests on before. You and I were just talking about it earlier. But, in that situation where the Sasquatch was throwing you food, like I said, that's not too far off on their behavior. I mean, I could definitely see something like that going on. But then sometimes you get the other side of the coin. I had a guest on the Insider Edition, and he talked about the Sasquatch being a crazy bag lady. I think he used the term homeless crazy bag lady moments. Like, it would walk, and what he would describe is this thing would walk, it looked like a huge hairy half man, half ape, or half woman, half ape. And he said that it just seemed like it was crazy, like it was insane. He said that early in the mornings it would come down off the ridgetop, and it would be going through his area. And he said what this thing would do was it would gibber and throw its hands in the air, kind of like what you'd see a crazy homeless person doing. And he said it would almost be like it was yelling at something, and then it would stop, and it would walk, and it would walk another 100 yards or so, and it would stop, and then it would have another crazy bag lady moment. It would start like gibbering, flailing its hands in the air like it was yelling at nothing, and then it would go back to walking. Do you think that with these creatures, some of them are just plain nuts?
Well, to put it bluntly, I think some of them are prone to mental diseases the same as we are. And the reason why I say that is because that night that Travis and I had been out on the Lone Star Trail in Texas, and that female came in and tried to kill us, but she had a meltdown. I mean, just, like a very horrible emotional meltdown. It was like watching an old lady with Alzheimer's, and I have watched old ladies with Alzheimer's in my family, and seen them have their meltdowns and everything, and it was sad, also, as well as scary, being 6 miles out in the middle of nowhere, for her to do that. And she just sat down and would just scream bloody murder. I don't know how to describe it other than just, insanity. And I have heard also, many of my Native American friends have also told me that they are prone to, or can be prone to, insanity. They can have schizophrenic tendencies. They can be bipolar, I guess. They can have emotional problems. And I do believe that. I believe that they can. I believe that they can have our diseases, our cancers, and everything else.
I know we assume a lot of times that these things are killing people. I think you and I are on the same page that, yeah, they do kill people and possibly eat them. Do you think that is a result of possibly some sort of mental disorder, or do you think that's a result of someone crossing a line or doing something that's perceived to be wrong in the Sasquatch's eyes, so it sets it off, and that's what happens to people who cross the line?
Well, this is my opinion, and this is my observations. Okay, some of it is my opinion, made because of the observations. I believe that we are on the menu a good bit of the time. I believe that yes, there are bad ones and there are good ones. There are ones that would never bother you. There are those that don't mind taking your head off and taking you home for dinner. There's some that don't mind just tearing you to pieces and throwing you up in a tree. There are some that don't want to have a confrontation with you. I fully believe, and I have observed the fact that you get too close and you could be toast. You'll pay for it. If you hurt one, you're going to pay for it. If you shoot at one, even if you don't hit it, you may just very well pay for it. That's why you should just always leave them alone. If you want to observe these creatures, do it in a manner where you're not putting yourself at risk. Do it in a manner where you're not having to get terribly close to them. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
You're going to have trouble with them if you mess with them. You're going to have trouble with them sometimes regardless. You're going to have them observing you. They're going to have, they're going to scream at you if they don't want you in the area. If they have young around, that's dangerous, just like, a bear or a cat or any other wild animal. If they have young ones around, like what happened to us here not too long ago out in the field.
Was that the story with the game cams? Do you mind telling that story?
Yeah, we went into an area and, where Squatches had been. Actually, it was where the female was. I believe that she has passed on, actually. It's been over 20 years. But it let us know right away, this male let us know right away that we were encroaching on its domain, I guess you might say. And we put up game cams, and we went back in there the 2 days after that, and I got screamed at right there by the truck in the middle, around 11 o'clock in the morning. I figured that they have something in there, like young ones and females that he just doesn't want us to be messing with. He doesn't want us out there. One of our members, Javier, he's a very good tracker, and he went in there. I was resting at the truck. He went down into the meadow area, and he found bedding places, and he found also very small footprints. They came back up. Javier said, "Bob, they got young ones out there." And I said, that's what I figured. They did have young ones out there. And that male, he didn't want us out there. He didn't want us messing with it. Anyway, it was also consistent because we got some things off of the trail cams of young ones, about 5 feet tall, maybe 5'6", 5'5", whatever. Because I put the cameras up about 6 feet, and they were just below the camera. We got some of them. We got several hundred pictures actually of them playing with the cameras. And so I guess Big Daddy didn't want us out there because of that. And what they did was, and I presume this was Big Daddy because the tracks were huge. They pulled up about 15-foot, 20-foot pine trees. They drug them up, crossed them on the trail, and they also crossed some pine limbs on the trail. They tore down some small trees all around where the camera was, and the footprints that Javier and I were finding were probably 17, 18 inches. That's just telling me that, hey, you guys need to get, don't leave these toys out here anymore. You guys need to go. The game cam was actually scratched up.
The ones in Colorado, had more of a human-like look to them. The ones in Texas have more of a chimp-like look to them. And I know it's a very vague description I'm given, but did you notice a difference between the two? I mean, did you think in Texas, Jesus, this is nothing like I ran into in Colorado?
Well, I was amazed. I was actually amazed at the frequency of the vocals that we got. I was totally amazed and blown away by the frequency of the sightings that we were getting. Yeah, I think they're different. I think their mentality is different. I think if you go into an area as small as the one that we're working in right now, and you have them in there, you're going to probably have some trouble with them. I think if you go in there leaving, things like, what people call offerings and putting up altars and stuff like that, but to them, this is saying, I'm taking this area, and you're going to have trouble with them. I think they think different than the ones in Colorado or up north, put it that way. As far as them looking different, well, they have more than one look here. They have, the ones that are really, really big, and they got the round heads and the little bitty ears. They look kind of, sometimes, some of them look kind of retarded, and I hate to say it that way, but that's what they look like. They mongoloids, in their look. Some of them look like big old huge bikers until they turn around, and it's not a big biker in a coat. It's it's a squatch. Some of them are a little bald-headed. They got round heads and they're bald-headed. Some of them have the chimpanzee look and crossed with orangutan and maybe something else. Yeah, they're quite different here in the South. I think from the Carolinas all the way down to Florida into Mississippi, all the way over to Texas. I think they're quite different. But we do have the black ones here with the chronicle head, and they're tall and everything. And most of the time, you don't have any problems with them. It's the other ones. And if you don't mind me saying so, in this one area, or if you don't mind me continuing going on.
Yeah, please do. You have the mic.
This one area that we have down here now for over 20 years, and we're not the only ones that research this area. Well, I've got some very good friends that come in there too. This one group, the old man, he's really big, but we came to the conclusion is that he keeps them from messing with the campers that are primitive camping in that area. He doesn't let them or like them to mess with the human beings, and he keeps them on a short leash. And that's what we have observed and ascertained. Now, if you're in the woods in the middle of the night, yeah, they're going to scream at you. They're going to look at you. They might throw some stuff at you. But the nighttime is their time out there. You can go out there all the time you want in the daytime and in the evening, but, you get out of there by the time it's dark because they're going to be hunting and eating and everything and going down to the creek to drink. And I think that he has enough sense to know, or did have enough sense to know, that you don't mess with these people. People come out here all the time. They hunt, they fish. One of the recreation areas are right up the road. Another recreation is right down the trail. There's a game preserve in there, and you can't hunt in there, and they go in there a lot. I just think that he has kept his group all these years from, messing with the campers, basically, messing with the people, basically.
How did you come to that conclusion?
Because they never mess with us. The primitive camping area is about 2 acres, and you make it into there, and you set up your camp and everything. They may come and look at you, but that's your area, and that's where you stay. The fact that, how can I say this? The fact that no one has had any complaints or come up with injuries or anything like that, and like they have in other places in that forest. He doesn't seem to mind us at all. He doesn't seem to mind that we see him. His group doesn't seem to mind, and they seem to stay out of our way. Kind of coexist together there, We've been in there for over 20 years or so. And Glenn, a good friend of mine, he has been in there with his group for close to 20 years. And never have there ever been any confrontation or any problem whatsoever. They have come onto camp now when we're gone. And, you get in there and you might see them run off. And that happened to Tim and some of the guys one time before too. And all full 7 of them got to see him. It's just a feeling that you get, Wes. These guys, they don't bother you. They don't mess with you. They don't care that you're there. And when you go to other places out there, my God, you try to put up your camp and you're getting things thrown at you. You're getting screamed at. I'm glad that they're throwing stuff and screaming at us before we get the tents out, That way we can just go on about our business. And sometimes you get hurt. They can throw a log, a pretty damn big log, and they can hit you with it, and it'll hurt you. It'll break your bones. I had some muscles torn in my arm, my shoulder one time because I got hit with a log. But out there, you don't feel any danger, you might say. You just have no problems with them.
Yeah, and I think you and I know firsthand about the log throwing and how they can throw logs.
Yeah, yeah, you remember that, don't you?
Yeah, I remember that really well. You know, one of the things I wanted to ask you, and I got all kinds of emails from people who are wanting to hear from you and love when you're on the show and all kinds of questions.
I'd like to tell everybody I appreciate it very much.
I think they appreciate you being on. One of the guys asked a question about, did you ever run into any dogmen when you were out there mining? And what's your take on the dogman?
I never, ever have run into a dogman while I was mining. Not ever. Just plain old squatches. A few wolves. A lot of coyotes. And a bear occasionally. A badger, but never a dogman. My take on dogman is that, well, up to about a year ago, or maybe a little over a year, I honestly never believed in dogman. I used to find tracks down here that were strange, and I thought, well, you know, this is something wrong with the Squatch. This cannot be, you know, a canine type creature. I discovered, and I'm not going to tell you how I discovered it, that I'm wrong. I do believe they do exist. I believe they're rare. And I believe I've been finding their footprints from time to time. And I have pictures of those footprints, as a matter of fact. And I think I've shown them to you. I guess that's pretty much all I have to say about, or all I can say about Dogman. Is, yeah, I think they're real. I never believed in it before, but I've always had an open mind. But I think the prints that I've been finding, yeah, are dogmen.
Do you think it's more
the canine type?
And that's what I was going to ask you. Do you think they're more of a canine type creature, or do you think it's more of an offshoot of Sasquatch?
I don't think it has any Sasquatch in it at all. I think it's more akin to a dog, to a wolf.
Yeah, very canine.
Yeah, very canine. I mean, I really don't know what they are, to be honest with you. I think they're pure evil myself.
Yeah. And you hear that a lot from witnesses. Evil seems to come up a lot whenever someone's talking about a dogman encounter. One of the other questions, I know there were so many questions. I apologize to the audience. I'm not getting to all of your questions for Bob. But one of the questions, a guy asked, he said, please ask Mr. Garrett if it has ever crossed his mind that he thinks that Sasquatch is demonic. The reason why I asked the question, they're almost impossible to get a clear image or a clear video of one, yet I believe that people are running into these things. And it's a fascinating question, Bob. I think a lot of people are curious about, you hear so many different things like the glowing red eyes, or you hear about different paranormal things that happen to people in the woods, and they liken it to Sasquatch, or they relate it to Sasquatch, even though I don't think it is. I could be wrong at the end of the day, but I don't think it is. There is a lot of weird things that happen out there in the forest to where I think some people think Sasquatch has to be a demonic entity that isn't really flesh and blood, but when people see them, they think they're flesh and blood.
Well, my daughter and my wife, their culture they have some beliefs that they are demonic, and also messengers, and also this and also that. To me, I think they can just be mean. I think that they can look mean. They can just be mean. As far as the glowing red eyes, honestly, the only glowing red eyes I have ever seen are on pigs. Because their eyes glow red.
Right.
However, I think that they're flesh and blood. I think they're unique in many ways. If they do have any type of supernatural abilities, the abilities are born from living in the wilderness. But as far as demonic, I could say that there has been times that I thought about that. It has crossed my mind, but I don't really know what to say about it. I'm confused, I guess you might say, a little bit. Some of them are very bad, and that may make them seem demonic. Very hateful, bullies. They'll kill you. Some don't really want to harm you, but if you get in the way, they will. And as far as getting blurry pictures and stuff like that, well, I got to tell you, I get very few blurry pictures of Sasquatch. I get some really good pictures of Sasquatch. I get some really good videos of Sasquatch. I just don't put them out. I don't think Sasquatch has to be blurry. That's my take on that.
Yeah, and I wish you'd release some of the older stuff that you have, Bob. You know, I think anyone that's been involved in this topic or has an interest in this topic, at some point, the demonic question, I think, comes up. And anyone who has been in this for a long time and that says that hasn't crossed their mind is lying, because I think that does cross people's minds sometimes. You know, there's a lot of situations out in the woods, and I'm trying to think of one right now, that can come across very paranormal, come across very, I guess what you would call demonic. I'm trying to think of a good example. But there's other situations too that are very natural. You know, I've been outsmarted by a cougar. A cougar was stalking me and Woody, my brother, and we had turned around to go back to backtrack it, and it had turned around and flanked us from the rear. Now it knew that we had turned around and was coming back towards it. It made a maneuver to flank us from the rear. But, you know, I've been outsmarted by different animals out in the woods. I think as humans, we tend to think we're the smartest thing out there, and that's not really the case.
No, you're right. It's not. And of course, you know, where we live, we don't live in the wild. Many of us are city dwellers and small town dwellers, and people like that. And we don't have what they have. And to a cougar, yeah, you're pretty lucky, because to a cougar, you're always on the menu.
Yeah. And I know you've come across cougars and bears out there, haven't you?
Oh yes, I have. I've had it to do with two of them, as a matter of two cougars, as a matter of fact.
You ended up killing one, didn't you?
I've killed two that have attacked me, yeah. One was up in the Four Corners area. I was down in some canyons, and I had it come on me. I only had a 22 at that time, and it wasn't even put together, my little survival 22. And I actually, it tore my shoulders up a little bit, or a good bit, with its claws, because it come up and jumped on me, from the front. If it had been behind me, I think it probably would have got its teeth sunk in my neck, and I probably had a broken neck. But I beat it with a piece of wood that was fairly long and really hard. It was hard, dry canyon wood, and I beat it pretty good in the head. Was able to get a couple of good whacks into it, and I meant to kill it. It went off, and that night I stayed up pretty much all night and fed wood into the fire. That morning, just as the sun come up, I had gone down, and it was probably about 20 yards from the overhang where I was at, on this little ledge that led up to the overhang. And I presume it bled to death in the brain. It died. I was, well, to be really honest with you, what I did was I took its pelt and I cooked some meat.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
And then the other one was here in Texas. I was up on a big cottonwood, or not cottonwood, but a big water oak tree that had gone over, and it was still alive. And I was hunting back in this area that we do a lot of work in also. Anyway, I was hunting. I was up on that tree down there at the base where the big root system was, and was using that as a backdrop as cover for me. I was deer hunting. And I just felt that tree move just a little bit. And just as I turned around to see what had moved the tree, I turned around to see what made the tree sway like that, go up and down. Like I said, it wasn't all the way on the ground. It was, kind of going up, laying over. As soon as I turned around, sure enough, it hit me and it knocked my rifle out of my hand, and I went down off the tree, and it come down and boogered me up a little bit, and I got between the pine trees. I had a bolo with me, and I could throw a knife. I threw that knife into his ribs, which really pissed him off. Anyway, I was trying to keep. We were racing around the tree, and he kept smacking me on the shins, and I was bleeding, and he had me opened up pretty good on my calves and my legs and on my shins. And from the fall, I had broken a couple of ribs, and I reached down and I picked up my 30-30 because that's what I was hunting with at the time. And I turned around real quick as he come around that big. It was a big old pine tree. It wasn't one of the little tiny pine trees. It was a big old pine tree. As he come around that pine tree, he was coming across the bark, up about head high, and I popped him with that 30-30. He fell down the stream. About that time, I pumped about 3 or 4 rounds into him, and he went running onto another big water oak, and went up in that tree. Died up there in the branches of that tree. You could hear the blood dripping down, dripping down, dripping down. My boys, Travis and Brandon, they come up after the shooting was over with, and I said, because they were probably about 200-300 yards away from me. And I told them, I said, gee, thanks, guys. And they said, well, hell, we weren't coming over here while you were shooting like that. So we could hear all the screaming and hollering, and we knew it was a cougar. We just gonna sit up here in this tree and wait for it to be over with. And I said, man, you guys are really something. And he said, Brandon says, oh, Pop, how we knew you could handle it. They didn't want to get hit with a straight bullet is what it was.
Yeah.
And anyway, Brandon, he takes his damn boots off, his hunting boots off, and he's shinnying up the damn tree. I said, what are you doing? He said, I want the pelt. I said, I've torn the pelt to pieces. Get back down here before you break something. He reluctantly comes back down, and you can hear the blood just dripping, 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 and you can see it up there and running down the side of the tree, the blood. Anyway, they took me to the hospital. A few sutures here and there, and I was just fine.
Well, the funny thing is, too, you hear about some of these researchers that go out and they're like, oh, I never take a gun. Sasquatch is the friendly forest giant. There's no reason to take a gun. And Sasquatch isn't the only thing that'll kill you out in these woods.
No, you got to be careful. You got to take you some protection out there, especially here in Texas, because you got some big blunt tails, and if people who don't know what a blunt tail is, it's about a 5-foot long water moccasin, and it takes more than a 22 to put them down. And you got hogs. We've had hogs come at us. We've been treed. We've had to down hogs before. On one of our areas out here, where we're doing our Operation Overwatch, we were getting screamed at by a big boar. And Javier, he looks at me and I looked at him, and he said, pig, it was screaming at us. And have you ever been screamed by a pig? You'd think a Sasquatch was screaming at you if you heard that. Then, there's the 600-pound pig that walks that road, that old fire road that we walk in on to the San Jacinto River. it's about 600 pounds by the looks of the hoofs. And you can smell the damn thing, because it just gets out of the way. It's got two big, wallers there that it wallers in. It'll go off into the woods and wait for us to pass. Well, one of these days, that big sucker is going to come out on us. Just like Javier said, it's going to do it sooner or later. It's going to get tired of this. And, you got to be careful. Of course, we got cougars, here, 2 years ago. We got, a cougar on flare, in the area that we work. We got another one twice on flare, across a pond that we work by. And, of course, bukus of bobcats, which, they can, give you a little trouble, but they don't want to mess with you anyway. Sometimes we get a wolf. Yes, there's still wolves down here. And then, of course, you got the alligators where we work, too. And the canebrakes, they're not just on the ground. They hang in the trees. Yeah, there's nothing to see, especially in the spring when they're giving birth and everything, to see, 5, 6 to 10 young ones curled up in the trees, and mama swallowing a squirrel. So yeah, there's a lot of things out there that'll kill you. And then of course, up in Colorado and different places like that, I had a bear come right up to my elbow. I was hunting deer, and I was sitting in this wall. I call it a wall. It's a rock wall that runs for miles, and there was a broken place in it, and I was sitting there looking down at this meadow, and it come up and just, steamed me up, boy. Hot breath all over me, and all I had was that 22. I guess he decided that I wasn't worth taking a bite of, and it was a big old black bear, which is kind of uncommon for black bears. They usually run. But he came up to see what I was doing, and when he was satisfied with what I was doing, he just turned around and walked off. As he walked off that way, I let him get about 20 yards away, and I got off, and I jumped the rest of the way down into the meadow, which was about a good 20-foot jump. So, yeah, you want to always keep, at least a pistol with you. Get your CHL or get your hunting license. Down here, you can open carry a pistol if you have your hunting license and your public hunting permit. And, I suggest that you take it with you. And I'm not, you don't have to be blood hungry or whatever, it's just good because you need the protection.
Yeah, Mother Nature doesn't suffer fools, that's for sure. And even if Mother Nature doesn't get you, going back to these creatures, they can be very, very unpredictable. I'm still thinking about your encounter from last night. One of the encounters I was thinking of, though, I had a hunter on one time, Bob, and I know the audience has heard this a million times, but I had this hunter on the show. And what happened to this hunter, he really wasn't doing anything. The guy was out hunting, minding his own business, and the Sasquatch comes out and starts screaming at him. And it throws a rock. And that's why I was asking about how the Sasquatch threw a rock, because the way he described it to me off the air was identical to the way you described it. And in that situation, like I said, it might have been territorial, but basically the Sasquatch attacked him. And he ended up shooting it in the head with a .22, and he's pretty sure it didn't kill it. He didn't think it penetrated the skull, but he knew it hurt it. He hurt the creature, it bled, and it went off screaming. You hear about some of these encounters when people are out there in the middle of nowhere, and I can't imagine not being armed in a situation like that. One of the questions I got from a listener, one of the questions someone wanted me to ask you about was the Albert Otzman story. And I think everyone out there listening probably knows that account. If you don't, I'm sure you can read about it online. But basically this guy was sleeping in a sleeping bag. Sasquatch picked him up and took him to an area where the rest of the Sasquatches were. there's certain things in his encounter where I've always felt like that was a true story. You know, like he talks about the gibber before anyone, you know, really mentioned it, ever talked about these things chattering. He describes these things chattering back and forth. And I've always felt like that was a legitimate encounter. One of the listeners wanted me to ask you what your opinion on that encounter is.
Well, you know, I've been on the fence on that one for, quite a long time. And I reread the story and I hear it retold and everything many, many times. And I think it's extremely interesting. And some of the aspects of it are quite consistent with Squatch activity, normal Squatch activity, like the way they chatter real fast and talk, in other words, conversing with each other. The interest in his coffee and what he's doing, the interest in the fire. I believe that actually happened to him, to be honest with you. I hope it never happens to me, but I believe him. I got one foot off the fence. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you on that. I know a lot of people say that they don't believe his story, but like you said with the chatter, he's talking about these things gibbering back and forth really fast in kind of a weird monkey chatter. And this is really before anyone talked about them chattering or gibbering.
Well, Wes, there's so much out there. There are so many mysteries out there that, most city dwellers, and I hope no one is offended by me saying that, but that's what I call people who live in the city. City dwellers, little town dwellers, they don't know. And in man's arrogance, they don't want to believe. Oh, this could happen. That can't happen. Oh, well, people have explored all of this. People have been everywhere in the United States, but that's simply not true. People have not been everywhere in the United States. There's a large portion of the mountains in Colorado that have never been explored fully, and there's a large portion of our mountain ranges all over, the Cascades, and I think you understand what I'm saying, is that there's just so much that people really have not seen. Much less Native Americans probably haven't seen, and much less a white person, Let me ask you this. How many times has a person truly experienced silence?
Very few.
That's right. But there's places here in America that you can go and experience true silence. And you would be amazed how much silence hurts your ears. I've had people tell me that, yeah, it's so quiet, my ears are ringing. It's so quiet, I can't stand it. But there are places here in our mountains and in our forests that you can go, and the only thing you may hear is the wind blow. And to me, that's the most beautiful sound in the world as far as that goes. And you have to climatize or whatever yourself to get used to it. Because if you think about it, people always hear something. You always hear in your air conditioner, you hear car, you hear radio. A lot of people sleep with their radios going. There's always a noise. But you get out there where there's true silence, where very few people go, and it's deafening to a lot of people, sometimes almost scary. I didn't mean to get off on that. I was just saying.
Yeah, no, you're fine, Bob. It's something to where I've always said it'd be nice to make enough money in life to go live in the mountains and never have to talk to another person or never have to see another person. I completely understand what you're saying. And there's a lot of weird things out there too in the woods. I got a few questions for you. People wanted me to ask you about some of the I guess what we call quote unquote paranormal stuff that happens out in the woods. And it got me thinking as I was reading this question, when I was a kid, there's a place up towards Mount St. Helens, and I want to say it's called like Washington's Vortex. And I'm sure my mother still has the picture, but you walk, it's this really weird place. You walk, there's a cabin there, and it's kind of a tourist trap right by Mount St. Helens. And as you walk into this cabin, it survived the blast and it still has all of the food in there. It's almost like a time capsule, but it's called Washington's Vortex. And if you walk into that area with a compass, your compass will just spin and spin and spin and spin. But in that area, as you walk into this little cabin, and I don't know what causes this, but they tell you to take a picture while you're standing inside this cabin. And you walk in, you feel like you're all standing up straight, and they snap a picture, but everyone's standing at an angle. But when you snap the picture, you feel like you're standing up straight. And it's just this weird place, and I'm sure there's other places like it around the country, but it's just this weird place that you run into. While you were out there mining and hiking all over around the country, did you ever see anything that we would consider, I guess, paranormal or anything strange out there while you're in the woods?
Well, yes. When you live close to the land like that, and like the Native Americans do, like I did, and other people have, I mean, I'm not the only one. I mean, there's people up there right now living exactly the same life I lived. When you live out there and you live so close to the land, and you're out there every day, this is where you live. The stars is your canopy, you know. Yeah, I've seen the orbs. I don't know what they are. I can't explain it. My wife would explain it, of course, through her culture as woodland spirits. She warns me of, not messing with them. And I don't want to mess with them. It's not what I do. I don't like the paranormal. I have experienced it out on the land, but I don't like it. And I have seen the orbs. I know that they're real. And I've talked to many hunters who, come up and, admit that they do have seen the orbs themselves. Yes, I've had paranormal encounters, out on the land. If you'd like, I can give you one particular thing that, happened to me out there.
Yeah, please do.
I came out of Mesa Verde area, out off the Ute Reservation there, and I came into Mesa Verde, and I came down that switchback. If anybody's ever been to Mesa Verde, I walked that switchback with all that traffic, all those RVs and everything coming down, and you're going to say, oh my God, if you've ever been out there.
Was this in Utah?
No, that's in Colorado. It's outside of Durango. Anyway, I took a canyon that I thought was still BLM land, and some of it was. And I walked for several days through these canyons, this series of canyons. I got to where I had found a trail, and it was so amazing, Wes, because the trail had been cut in by feet. So many thousands of years of use had actually, I guess, just melted into that rock, and you could see the feet. Really and truly, you could see the where the feet had come down. You could see the indentions and everything. And I just love these old places, As I walked, I wondered about the people who had walked there, way before me. And I wondered if I was one of the first people in maybe hundreds of years to walk that trail again. And it pretty much gave me cold chills. But I had found an area where you could see, the wind and the rain and everything, and soil had, come over, but there was definitely a campfire there, and it was old. I mean, this was ancient. And the ring was still there, and, I fixed the ring back up, and I put my campfire there. And the first night, I heard voices, and I heard the whisper of feet. You know, just moccasin whispered feet as they walked past. You know, it was quite amazing. It was a little scary, of course, you know, because I don't like paranormal. And the second night, I decided that I wouldn't put my campfire back in that old ring. I would make me a new one and not put my campfire, you know, in that one. I was asleep, and I heard this noise. It sounded like my, you know, my coffee pot, my teapot. And I looked up, and when I looked up, I swear to God, there was an old man, some type of Indian. I had no idea what he was, and I thought that I should speak to this man. And then I realized that I could see through this man. And he was sitting by my fire. And then he was gone. And I thought, oh, holy cow, you know, I just saw a ghost. You know, it stays with me today. I mean, nothing was really bad happening or anything, but he was just there. And I thought to myself, you know, this is what he did. He camped here, and he sat by his fire. I spoke to a friend of mine. Her name is Jen, and she's a ghost hunter. And she, you know, told me that, you know, some of that's probably residual. And, you know, explained to me what that was. And, you know, it made sense. And, yeah, I know that, you know, you go into an old building, you know, back from the 1700s where lots and lots and lots of people, you know, had lived their life and had been in there, and a lot of things had taken place and everything that, you know, I mean, when it's real quiet and everything in there, you might hear something. You might hear voices. I don't know why it does that and why it sticks, you know, around like that, but I guess it does. And I moved on, and that's one reason why I don't pick up anything. I don't pick up any of the arrowheads that I find. Just every once in a while, I might, you know, take something and I put it in this pouch that I've got. And I have a few things in there, and some few rocks and scrapers, some broken stone knives and things like that. But I try not to pick it up. And on this particular time, you know, I was out where the Anasazi, you know, were. I had no idea how long these things have laid there. I had found a place where they had chipped a lot of rock. And, you know, I found a chipping hammer. I found some old arrowheads. I even found a hide scraper, what I figured was a hide scraper, and an awl, you know, where they made to punch holes into buckskin and stuff, you know, into their hides that they rendered and everything. And I just could not pick it up, because how long had it laid there and the wind has covered it up and uncovered it? How long has those things been there? I just couldn't pick it up. It just hit me that, you know, it wasn't right. And just, you know, I don't think it's right to mess with the dead either, you know, to dig up these bones and everything. But I don't know. People might say I'm silly or something, but that's just the way I felt about it. And so I left it. And that's when, you know, I finally found my way up into an Anasazi ruin. And when I got up there, well, you know, the Anasazi ruin, you know, where the scrapers, where they, you know, are grinders that they grind their corn and other, you know, things with. You know, I found things like that up there. And the corn, you know, there was still corn kernels stuck inside of those grinders. And I found a corn crib that had, you know, still had little tiny corns in it. And, you know, they were dried. You know, like I told you, you know, I could probably use them for popcorn. You know, at night, you know, I've stayed up there for about 2 or 3 months. And at night I could hear things that I know, had to be residual or ghosts, spirits, whatever you want to call it. But it didn't really bother me. I wasn't camping inside any of the ruins or anything. I was outside, where the spring that ran, there was a big old spring that ran down there and made a couple of waterfalls, had good sweet water, and I was camped there. I thought it was more respectful in a way to the dead, to whatever, And yes, I've had a lot of Native American influence in my life, and that seemed the right thing to do. It was amazing, staying there for those months that I stayed there. And up on top, you could see where up on top of the mesa or the canyon, you could see where they had farmed, and there were still little pieces, little corn plants here and there and everything, spindly little things, and stuff like that. And, it's just totally all amazing. And to me, I thought to myself, how long has this been here? How long have these things reseeded themselves? How long has the Anasazi been, been gone? How long did they live there? 1,000 years, 800 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years? I don't know. But it was just utterly amazing because it was just like they were still there in a way. And I know that doesn't have anything to do with Sasquatch, but yeah, that's kind of the paranormal things that I've run into out there.
Well, no, I think that's important to talk about. There is weird things that happen. I had a guy one time who had a Sasquatch encounter, and then we got off air, and he said, Wes, I want to tell you about this that happened to me. He ended up sleeping in an old Indian burial ground, and he ended up staying the night there.
That's something I won't do.
Yeah. Well, he made that mistake, and he said that he heard what sounded like he was awoken at night, and what sounded like old Indian language of a bunch of Indians all talking in the middle of the night. He would hear stuff run through his camp, and there was nothing there, and he decided to get out of there. But, it's like I always said, I really think that stuff goes on. I really do. People, will say, well, they don't believe in that, but I think that stuff goes on. I really do. I think there's weird stuff like the orbs. Who ever thought that people would see orbs in the forest, but yet, I can produce about 1,000 emails of people who say they saw these orbs out running around the forest, flying around in the forest. A lot of that goes on. It's kind of goes back to what I was asking about the glowing red eyes that people see. And they don't necessarily see a Sasquatch with glowing red eyes, but they'll see an outline of a figure that's about 7 to 8 feet tall with glowing red eyes, and they think it's automatically Sasquatch. But to me, I think that's something more demonic. There was an entity in some of the biblical writings about a demonic figure that had glowing red eyes that people would run into out in the woods, up in the mountains. They'd run into this entity that had glowing red eyes, and it was a demonic entity that they'd run into in the forest. I don't think that has anything to do with Sasquatch.
I don't either, Wes. I don't believe that their orbs and everything have anything to do with Sasquatch. I think it's a whole different ball of wax, basically.
Yeah, a lot of these people, they see the glowing red eyes, and do I believe them? Yeah, I do. I think they probably ran into something weird out there. Do I think it was Sasquatch related? I don't. But I do believe that they ran into something. They are describing something that they're running into.
Well, I was just going to say, there are things out there. When you live out there like I did, and even some of the hunters that go out there and they spend a lot of time, a lot of the old prospectors, a lot of prospectors today, if you could get some to come on, they might could tell you some tales. But you're out there on that land. You're out there. You're not anywhere near a town or a city. You're just out there. And this is all open land, all open forest. And things happen out there. They don't just stand out there. The trees don't just stand out there alone. There's stuff out there. And I mean, there's stuff that I've seen in the skies. I've seen come down and go through, canyons in high meadows and stuff like that I can't explain. There's stuff out there. That's all I can say is that there is stuff out there. And there are some bad stuff out there too, like what you're talking about. I believe that demons also walk that country, as you were saying, something demonic. I believe that, I totally believe that. I've had some run-ins with, paranormal things that, I just really hate paranormal. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like it. I would rather deal with a Sasquatch than deal with ghosts or something demonic or whatever. Put it that way.
Yeah, Sasquatch can bleed.
But there's things out there. Yeah, people should need to believe that there are things out there.
I'm beginning to understand a little bit more about why. This topic is a funny topic because when you're talking to even some of the Native Americans, they'll call it the forest brother or the friendly forest giant. And then you talk to some other Native Americans and they'll tell you it's a cannibal. It'll rip your head off. It'll eat you.
Yeah, or the giant rapist or...
Yeah, or the giant rapist or, and they'll give it different...
The kidnapper.
And I think the kidnapper, yeah. And I think a lot of that has to do with people's experiences with these things. I mean, to be honest with you, I think some of the Native Americans are just as confused as we are, in the sense that everyone has a different story based on their own experiences. Yet I believe all of their experiences. Does that make sense? I mean,
yeah, it makes sense.
It's kind of like
because the Native Americans, of course, they've lived their life on the land, and they still do, and they still have that spiritual awareness, that a lot of white people don't have. And I guess that's what I was trying to talk about, or trying to, relay, is that, I did have that spiritual awareness. From being out there and living out there like I did. And so do they, they understand, the spiritual world a lot better than, Anglos do, as they call us. You go out there on the land and you'll see stuff. You will hear stuff that have anything to do with Sasquatch. You'll feel things. You'll get, like I told you, when I was in the Four Corners area, I was down in some of those canyons, and I was sitting up on one of the canyon walls looking down, looking for a way to get down into the canyon. The air did something really weird. It shook. The air, that's the only way I could describe it, is that it shook. It shook all around me and all around. And it kind of had a shimmer to it. And it didn't last very long, but when it was over with, I didn't recognize where I was at. The trees were wrong, that were down in the canyon, and, some of the rocks were wrong. And I couldn't find my camp. And, I camped that night up on the rim of the canyon, and, had made a new camp and everything. I didn't know where my pack was. I didn't know where anything was. I was just totally turned around. And sometime in the night, I woke up because it was doing it again. And when it was over with and done, my camp was about 20 feet away from me, my original camp. And how do you explain that? How do you explain that? You can't explain that to people. And I found out that, other people have had those same experiences. It's just something that I don't very easily talk about. It's very personal, actually, and it really is to me very personal. And but this is what really happened. And I had some Native Americans who I know actually explained this to me. They called it like similar to a skyquake, in a way. an airquake. Like you have a earthquake, well, you have an airquake. I'd never heard anything like that before, but they were familiar with it. They had a word for it, you know, in their language. And it's something that they don't talk about very often, especially the Anglos. It's kind of like when it's done, you're in a whole different place. And this has happened to me about 2 or 3 times out there, especially in the Canyonlands around the Four Corners. Yeah, totally disoriented. Everything looked different. It was almost like everything was wrong, like you were in a different place somehow.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to, Bob, is it's called a skyquake. I think that's what you're referring to. And it's a real phenomenon that goes on this planet. I think even Lewis and Clark talked about it. And kind of the same thing as you're describing is what they described. And they talked about the feeling of getting disoriented.
Well, I was just going to say, and that's how it was explained to me, was that, you know, I was actually kind of lucky because sometimes when that happens, they say people don't come back. There's stuff out there that we don't understand. When you experience it, you don't understand it, and you try to put it away. And if you tell it, in you know, our arrogance, we don't believe people who tell you these things, and or we scoff at them. You know, there's things to be learned about the natural world that we don't understand, and I always say this to everybody that I meet, especially young kids who are demoralized or you know, just don't understand what they were fighting for and things like that. I tell them, go on a walkabout, you know, just go out there and climb a mesa, go up there and pan some gold and stay out there for a few months. You know, you don't have to winter out there or anything like that. You know, just go for the summer. Take a walk around. You know, it's very spiritual. I think all young people need to get out of the city and spend a few months out there in the natural world. I think that it would be better for them. I don't know. Some people might not get anything out of it, but I think a lot of people would. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be preaching.
No, you're fine, Bob. You know, and that's kind of one of the things why I hate to even say this, especially after the Bigfoot saving your life story. I'm going to feel like a real bastard saying this, but, you know, that's why I really want one of these things shot and brought in so that we could end this mystery and move on to the next.
Yeah, but I hope nobody shoots any of them except for the mean ones. They can come shoot the mean ones down here. But yeah, you're right. You know, yeah, I suppose that, I guess you'd have to have a body to stop all the hullabaloo, I guess you might say. And the thing about it is that, you know, you got to do, I guess you'd have to do it all in secret and everything. And, you know, don't let anybody see it until you get up to a television station or whatever. And then, you know, let people look at it. Maybe have a veterinarian or a couple of doctors with you to verify that this is real. And the thing about it is, Wes, you know, I don't mind talking about them. I don't mind getting their sounds. I don't mind doing a lot of that stuff. But in a lot of ways, I don't really care if Sasquatch is ever proved to be real. I know that they're real, and, you know, people are arrogant, and they're not going to, you know, believe anything. You could bring a body in and show it on TV, and there'll still be scuffers. You know, there'll still be people that, you know, hate you for bringing it in. There'll still be people who believe it's fake, and then the rumors start and everything. And you know, I just say leave it be. Just leave it be. You know, they're fine where they're at, and we're fine where we're at. And anybody who wants to go out there and live like I did, you know, I think it's a good life. I think they'll learn a lot of stuff. They'll be amazed what they'll see. And they may not even see a Sasquatch. They may never see one. But then again, they might. But I know they'll see other things. And they'll have other feelings. And by the time it's over with, they'll have a respect for Mother Nature. Mother Nature is a very harsh teacher. She can either teach you and help you survive, and you've got to get that lesson down, or either she will kill you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Bob, thanks for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. I enjoyed talking with you, even though some of it wasn't really Sasquatch related. It was fun hearing the stories from when you were out there mining. So thank you again for coming on.
I just want to give a shout out to all my buddies out there that, to Tim and Mark and Javier and to Mo and to Gabe, and just say, keep on squatching, I guess. Well, I appreciate you asking me, and I really do appreciate the people who, enjoy listening to me and everything. I didn't realize it, to be honest with you, and I really do appreciate them.